You're listening to Underground USA News.
Wednesday, August 6, 2025. In a promising development for the U.S. economy, the trade deficit contracted by 16% in June to $60.2 billion, down from $71.7 billion in May, driven primarily by a sharp decline in imports. This reduction, reported by the Bureau of Economic Analysis, reflects the impact of President Trump's tariff policies, which have reshaped global trade dynamics and reduced the trade shortfall with China to its lowest level since February 2004. The smaller trade gap is expected to bolster second quarter GDP growth, signaling a potential rebound in economic activity. While some economists caution that reduced imports may indicate weaker domestic demand, the overall trend suggests a strengthening economic position as trade policies encourage domestic production and export growth. Apple's announcement of an additional $100 billion investment in U.S. manufacturing over the next 4 years, bringing its total commitment to $600 billion, signals a robust endorsement of American economic growth and job creation. Unveiled at the White House with President Trump and Apple CEO Tim Cook, this move aligns with efforts to reshore critical production, enhancing economic and national security. The investment, which includes plans for a new Texas factory for AI servers and 20,000 research and development jobs, has already driven a nearly 3% surge in Apple's stock, reflecting market confidence in the company's strategic focus on domestic expansion. While some question the feasibility of fully onshoring iPhone production, this initiative underscores Apple's role in strengthening U.S. industry amid a dynamic global trade landscape. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, under Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has terminated 22 mRNA vaccine development projects worth nearly $500 million, redirecting funds to alternative vaccine platforms deemed safer and more effective against respiratory viruses like COVID-19 and influenza. The decision, following a review of mRNA technology, reflects skepticism about its ability to protect against upper respiratory infections and concerns over potential risks, with Kennedy emphasizing a shift toward whole virus vaccines and other innovative approaches to ensure public health safety. Critics argue this move could undermine rapid response capabilities for future pandemics, while supporters applaud the focus on transparency and broader protection strategies. Democrat U.S. Senator Adam Schiff of California is under investigation by the Maryland Attorney General following a referral from the Federal Housing Finance Agency for alleged mortgage fraud. The accusation centers on Schiff's 2011 affidavit, where he claimed a Maryland home as his primary residence to secure favorable loan terms, despite representing California in Congress. Evidence suggests he may have falsified bank documents and property records, potentially violating laws on wire fraud, bank fraud, and false financial statements. Schiff, who has denied the allegations, also claimed a California condo as his primary residence for tax benefits, raising questions about his integrity as a public official. This investigation marks a significant challenge for Schiff, known for his vocal criticism of political opponents. Violent crime in the United States dropped by 4.5% in 2024, marking the second year of consecutive declines, according to the FBI's annual crime report. The data, compiled from 16,675 law enforcement agencies, shows a significant 14.9% decrease in murder and non-negligent manslaughter, the lowest in 9 years, alongside a 5.2% reduction in rape incidents and an 8.1% drop in property crimes, including an 18.6% decline in motor vehicle theft. While this suggests a positive trend in public safety, some analysts caution that incomplete reporting from certain agencies could skew perceptions, emphasizing the need for more consistent data collection to ensure an accurate picture of crime trends. The FBI plans to release monthly reports to enhance transparency and aid law enforcement efforts. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has announced plans to seek judicial orders to declare the seats of Democrat lawmakers vacant if they fail to return by the Friday deadline set by House Speaker Dustin Burrows following their abrupt departure from the state to block a Republican-led redistricting plan. Paxton argues that their absence constitutes an abandonment of office, accusing them of prioritizing publicity over their constitutional duties to Texas constituents. This move comes after a 2021 Texas Supreme Court ruling affirming the legislature's authority to compel attendance potentially through arrest, as over 50 Democrats fled to avoid a quorum stalling critical legislative efforts. Paxton's firm stance underscores his commitment to ensuring elected officials fulfill their responsibilities, warning that failure to return will result in severe consequences. The Democratic Socialists of America have openly acknowledged that New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani's campaign positions them to significantly expand their influence, with DSA leader Daniel Gooden stating it offers their best opportunity to seize state power. Mamdani, a self-proclaimed socialist, has collaborated closely with the DSA, including crafting his trans rights platform, which proposes using city resources to provide free gender-affirming care nationwide. Critics argue this reflects a broader agenda of centralized control, with Mamdani's past advocacy for policies like abolishing private property and establishing city-run grocery stores raising concerns about economic overreach. While Mamdani's campaign energizes progressive and Muslim voter bases, it faces skepticism from moderates and business leaders wary of his radical proposals. On August 6, 2025, Fort Stewart, a major U.S. Army base in Georgia, was rocked by an active shooter incident in the 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team area, resulting in 5 soldiers being wounded. The base was placed on lockdown at 11:04 a.m., with law enforcement swiftly apprehending the suspect by 11:35 a.m., eliminating any ongoing threat to the community. The injured soldiers were treated on-site and transported to Wynn Army Community Hospital, with some moved to Memorial Health University Medical Center in Savannah for further care. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp and other officials expressed prayers and support for the victims, their families, and the Fort Stewart community, as the investigation continues to determine the motive and circumstances behind this tragic event. On August 1, 2025, U.S. District Judge William Smith upheld Rhode Island's gun permit system, which requires citizens to demonstrate a need for open carry, dismissing a lawsuit by gun owners led by Michael O'Neill of the Rhode Island Second Amendment Coalition. The ruling asserts that unrestricted permits are a privilege, not a constitutional right, despite the 2022 Supreme Court decision in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Broom, which struck down a similar New York law for restricting concealed carry rights. Smith argued Rhode Island's law aligns with historical regulations, as it allows concealed carry while restricting open carry. Critics, including the plaintiff's attorney Frank Zaccaxio, argue this decision contradicts Broom and plan to appeal, citing concerns that such restrictions undermine the Second Amendment's protections for law-abiding citizens' right to bear arms. President Trump has issued a stern warning to Washington, D.C. authorities, threatening federal intervention if the city fails to curb escalating youth violence, particularly following the brutal assault on former Department of Government Efficiency employee Edward Korestein. In a social media post, Trump criticized local leadership for leniency, alleging that juveniles as young as 14 are committing heinous crimes like muggings and shootings without fear of consequences due to weak prosecution policies. He called for stricter measures, including prosecuting minors as adults, to restore safety and order to the nation's capital, emphasizing that D.C. must be a safe and appealing city for both Americans and global visitors. While some argue crime rates have recently declined, the incident involving Korestein has reignited debate over local governance and public safety, with Trump vowing to run the city how it should be run if local officials don't act swiftly. On August 5, 2025, the Trump administration dismissed 5 of the 7 members of Puerto Rico's Federal Financial Oversight Board, all Democrats, citing inefficiencies in the board's management of the territory's fragile economy. The move, which leaves only 2 members in place, has sparked concerns about potential disruptions to Puerto Rico's financial stability, with critics warning that new appointees could prioritize partisan interests over the island's economic recovery. Supporters argue the shakeup is necessary to restore effective leadership and address long-standing fiscal mismanagement. The decision comes amid broader tensions over federal funding and Puerto Rico's territorial status, with some questioning the administration's long-term strategy for the island's economic challenges. Republican Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton has urged the Internal Revenue Service to investigate the Council on American-Islamic Relations, questioning its tax-exempt status due to alleged connections to terrorist organizations, including Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. In a letter to IRS Commissioner Billy Long, Cotton argued that tax-exempt status is a privilege that should not be extended to organizations with ties to terrorism, citing past evidence and public statements from CARE's leadership as indicators of support for such groups. CARE has dismissed these claims as debunked conspiracy theories, likening the inquiry to McCarthy-era tactics, while defending its role as a civil rights organization protecting American Muslims. This move underscores Cotton's broader push for scrutiny of organizations he views as undermining national security, raising questions about the balance between free speech and accountability for nonprofit entities. Over the weekend, an unidentified individual launched a brazen arson attack on an immigration and customs enforcement field office in Yakima, Washington, throwing a rock through a window and setting a fire at the back of the building. Federal agents escaped unharmed, but the incident, which local authorities are investigating as arson, underscores a disturbing 830% surge in attacks against ICE personnel, as noted by the Department of Homeland Security. DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin pointed to inflammatory rhetoric from some Democrat leaders, including Hakeem Jeffries and Tim Walz, as fueling hostility toward ICE, though it remains unclear if agents were the specific target. The attack follows a pattern of violence against the agency, with recent incidents in Texas and California, highlighting the growing risks faced by federal immigration officers in their efforts to enforce the law. OpenAI has terminated a feature that allowed ChatGPT conversations to be indexed by Google and other search engines, following widespread privacy concerns after thousands of private chats, including sensitive personal and professional details, appeared in search results. The feature, described as a short-lived experiment, required users to opt in via a checkbox, but many were unaware their conversations could become publicly searchable, raising questions about transparency and data protection in AI platforms. OpenAI's Chief Information Security Officer, Dane Stuckey, acknowledged the misstep, stating the company is working to remove indexed content and prioritizing user privacy moving forward. This incident underscores the challenges tech companies face in balancing innovation with safeguarding personal information, a value conservatives hold dear in protecting individual rights against unchecked corporate overreach. The U.S. Department of Energy has taken a significant step toward reducing America's reliance on foreign nuclear fuel by conditionally selecting Standard Nuclear of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, as the first participant in its fuel line pilot program, announced in July 2025. This initiative, aligned with President Trump's executive orders to advance nuclear energy for national security, aims to establish a robust domestic supply chain for advanced nuclear fuel, particularly TRISO fuel, to support next-generation reactors targeting criticality by July 4, 2026. By leveraging private sector innovation and DOE oversight, the program seeks to strengthen energy security and economic competitiveness, while minimizing dependence on foreign uranium sources, marking a practical move toward revitalizing America's nuclear industry. Romania, a steadfast NATO ally, was compelled to deploy F-16 fighter jets in response to a brazen Russian drone attack on Ukrainian infrastructure just half a mile from its border, an alarming escalation that underscores the growing threat of Russia's aggression spilling into NATO territory. The strikes, targeting oil and gas pipelines in Ukraine's Odessa region, produced visible flames and smoke across the Danube River, prompting Romania's Ministry of National Defense to monitor its airspace vigilantly, though no unauthorized intrusions were detected. Concurrently, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow, part of President Trump's push for a Ukraine peace deal ahead of a looming Friday deadline. The lack of progress in these talks, coupled with Russia's intensified attacks, raises concerns about Putin's commitment to de-escalation, as NATO members like Lithuania also report drone incursions from Russia's ally, Belarus, with the U.S. signaling potential sanctions and secondary tariffs if no ceasefire is reached. The situation remains a critical test of diplomatic resolve and NATO's readiness to defend its borders. In a troubling development, Iranian nuclear scientists made a clandestine visit to Russian scientific institutes in the summer of 2024, focusing on dual-use technologies with potential applications in nuclear weapons research. This covert trip, involving sanctioned Iranian and Russian entities, signals a deepening technological and defense partnership between Tehran and Moscow, particularly following the Ukraine conflict. While Iran maintains its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes, the visit has heightened Western fears about Iran's intentions, especially given its history of pursuing nuclear capabilities and the recent Israeli-US strikes on its nuclear facilities. Such actions underscore the ongoing challenge of ensuring Iran does not cross the threshold to nuclear weaponization, threatening Middle East stability and global security. Recent United Nations data exposes a dire situation in Gaza, where 88.7% of aid trucks entering the region since May 19, 2025 have been looted or hijacked, primarily by Hamas and other armed groups. This large-scale theft, with 90.7% of trucks intercepted in June and 94% in July, has severely hampered humanitarian efforts, with Hamas reportedly profiteering up to $1 billion in 2024 by controlling and reselling aid on the black market. While the UN has not directly named Hamas, the data aligns with Israeli military assessments that point to the terrorist group as the primary obstacle to delivering food and supplies to Gaza's civilians. Meanwhile, the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has delivered over 100 million meals since May, bypassing Hamas, though it faces criticism and resistance from the UN and other international aid groups wary of its methods. A new Franco-British agreement, dubbed the One-In, One-Out deal, came into force on August 5, 2025, aiming to address the surge of illegal migrant crossings across the English Channel. Under the pilot scheme, the UK will return migrants arriving on small boats to France if their asylum claims are deemed inadmissible, while accepting an equal number of asylum seekers from France with verified ties to Britain. The deal, ratified with EU approval, seeks to disrupt people smuggling networks, with initial detentions expected within days and a potential cap of 2,600 returns annually. While Home Secretary Yvette Cooper emphasizes undermining smugglers' operations, critics argue the limited scope may fail to deter crossings, and some in France view it as favoring the UK. The agreement, set to run until June 2026, reflects a pragmatic approach to a persistent issue, though its effectiveness remains under scrutiny. The United States has temporarily sealed off its embassy in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, due to heavy gunfire erupting in the nearby Tabar area as the nation grapples with intensifying gang violence. The State Department issued a security alert on August 4, 2025, halting all official personnel movement outside the embassy compound and urging citizens to avoid the area, following reports of prolonged clashes between armed gangs and police. Haiti, the Western Hemisphere's poorest country, continues to face a dire crisis, with over 41 deaths attributed to gang-related violence in the first half of 2025, according to the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. The situation underscores the challenges of restoring order in a nation where rival gangs control significant territories, perpetuating murders, rapes, and kidnappings amid a fragile political landscape.
You're listening to Underground USA News,